The wheels of the plane hit the tarmac in Chicago with a heavy thud, jolting me awake. I had spent the last 14 hours in the air, flying back from restoring a Renaissance garden in Florence, dreaming of one thing, the silence of my grandmother's vineyard. I turned on my phone. The screen lit up, flooding with notifications, but one message sat at the top, glowing like a warning flare. It was from my sister, Morgan. Sold grandmother's lake house for $9.2 million. Done deal. Thanks for staying in Europe. I stared at the words until they blurred. 9.2 million. The number felt abstract, violent. That house wasn't just assets or square footage. It was a historic estate on the bluffs of Lake Michigan, a place grandmother Christina had spent 50 years cultivating. It was promised to be preserved, not sold. Panic tried to seize my chest, but my mind rejected it. There was no room for hysteria, only logistics. My sister hadn't just sold a house, she had sold our history while I was 30,000 feet in the air. I grabbed my bag, bypassed the baggage claim, and walked straight to the rental car counter. My hands weren't shaking. They were gripping the handle of my suitcase so hard my knuckles turned white. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I drove north, pushing the rental car to 80 miles an hour. The highway blurred into a gray streak, but my mind was crystal clear. I needed to see it. I needed to see what she had done. When I turned onto the private gravel road leading to the estate, I expected to see a for sale sign. I expected to see a lockbox. What I saw was a slaughter. Heavy machinery blocked the driveway. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and pulverized wood. A massive yellow excavator was parked right in the middle of the heritage vineyard, its bucket resting on a pile of uprooted vines that had been growing there since the 1940s. They weren't renovating. They were erasing. The car skidded to a halt in the gravel. I marched toward the noise. A man in a hard hat and a safety vest was shouting orders at a crew near the main house. "Hey," I shouted, my voice cutting through the mechanical roar. "Stop the work." The foreman turned, looking me up and down with the kind of dismissal men usually reserve for women they think are lost. "Lady, this is a private construction site," he said, spitting on the ground. "You need to turn around." I stepped closer, ignoring the dust coating my boots. "I am the owner of this property," I said, my voice low and level. "And I didn't authorize a demolition." He laughed, a short, barking sound. "Property sold 6 weeks ago, sweetheart. We got a permit and a schedule to keep. Now move before I call the cops." Standing my ground, I pulled out my phone and walked past him, straight to the orange permit tacked to the temporary fencing. I'm a landscape architect. I don't just look at land, I read it. I scanned the permit details, my eyes locking onto the zoning codes. They were categorized for light residential renovation, but the equipment they had on site was for deep foundation excavation. I looked at the ground. They were digging less than 50 feet from the bluff edge. I knew the hydrology of this estate better than I knew my own face. There was a protected water table just 6 feet below the surface here. If they dug that deep without a specialized environmental impact survey, they were committing a federal zoning violation. I looked back at the foreman. He thought he was dealing with an emotional heir who was sad about her grandma's house. He didn't realize he was dealing with a professional who knew exactly how to shut him down. My camera shutter clicked. Once for the permit. Once for the wide shot of the excavator sitting on the wet soil. And finally, a close-up of the water pooling in the tire tracks, proof of the water table breach. "You're digging in a protected wetland buffer," I said, almost to myself. The foreman stepped toward me, aggressive now. I said leave. I turned and walked back to the vehicle. I had what I needed. He could keep digging for another hour if he wanted. By noon, I would have a stop work order that would freeze this site so hard the engines would rust. I got back into the car and typed a single address into the GPS. The luxury Fairmont Hotel downtown. That's where Morgan's location sharing said she was staying. I wasn't going there to fight. I was going there to inspect the damage. The hotel suite smelled like expensive lilies and stale champagne. When Morgan opened the door, she was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of fear. But then she blinked, and it was gone, replaced by that familiar, toxic arrogance. "You're back," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "You could have called." I walked past her into the living area. It was littered with shopping bags, Chanel, Gucci, things she had bought with the deposit money. The advance. "You sold the vineyard, Morgan," I said, standing in the center of the room. "You forged my signature and you sold it." She sighed, tightening the belt of her robe, and walked over to the minibar. "I saved us," she said, pouring herself a mimosa. That place was a money pit. The taxes, the maintenance. It was drowning me. "Drowning you?" I asked, my voice rising just an octave. "I paid the property taxes, Morgan. I paid the insurance. I paid the groundskeeper. You lived in the guest house rent-free for 3 years. The only thing drowning you was your own lifestyle." She spun around, the glass shaking in her hand. "That's exactly it, isn't it? Madeline, the savior. Madeline, the big-shot architect restoring castles in Europe while I'm stuck here in the dust." She took a step toward me, her face twisting into something ugly. "You think you own that place because you sent checks? I was there. I was the one who had to look at it every day, rotting away. Grandmother Christina wanted us to have a future, not a museum. This was it. The delusion. She truly believed that her proximity to the asset gave her the right to consume it. She believed that because she had stayed behind, mostly because she had failed at every job she ever tried, she was the true heir. "I deserve this money," she hissed, gesturing to the shopping bags. "I gave up years of my life staying in that town. You left. You don't get to leave and then come back and tell me what to do with my inheritance." I looked at her, really looked at her. I didn't see a sister. I saw a parasite that had finally killed the host. "It wasn't your inheritance, Morgan," I said coldly. "It was ours. And you didn't sell it. You stole it." She laughed, a brittle sound. "It's done, Maddie. The money is in the offshore account. The developers have the deed. You can scream all you want, but you can't unsign a contract." She smiled then, a cruel, victorious smile. "Go back to Europe. Take a payout if you want. But the vineyard is gone." I looked at the champagne glass in her hand, thinking of the excavator tearing up the soil. She thought this was over. She thought the paperwork was a shield. She didn't know I had photos of a zoning violation that could bankrupt her buyer. And she certainly didn't know I was heading to see Nathan next. I turned to the door. "Enjoy the champagne, Morgan," I said. "I have a feeling it's the last expensive thing you're going to taste for a very long time." Nathan's real estate office was in a sleek glass building downtown, the kind that screamed new money and low ethics. The receptionist tried to stop me, murmuring something about appointments, but I walked past her desk and pushed open the door to his corner office. Nathan looked up from his desk, startled. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny, his smile instantly snapping into place like a reflex. "Maddie," he said, standing up and extending a hand as if we were meeting for coffee. "I heard you were back in town. Rough morning?" I ignored his hand. I walked up to his desk and slammed my palm down on the polished wood. "You witnessed the deed, Nathan. You notarized a signature that you knew was fake." He didn't flinch. He sat back down, steepling his fingers, that practice calm that used to make me feel safe and now just made me nauseous. "Fake is a strong word," he said softly. "Irregular, maybe. But fake?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a file folder, sliding it across the desk toward me. "Look at the signature, Maddie. Really look at it." I opened the folder. There, on the bottom of the grant deed, was my name. Madeline Rose. The loops were perfect. The slant was identical to mine. It looked exactly like the way I signed every permit application, every check. My heart hammered against my ribs. For a split second, the room spun. Had I signed something? Had I been so tired one night, so overworked, that I clicked a DocuSign link without reading? We did it over Zoom, Nathan said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. You were in Florence. It was late there. You looked exhausted, honestly. You told Morgan you just wanted it done so you could focus on the park restoration. He leaned forward, his eyes full of fake concern. Don't you remember, Maddie? You were stressed. You said, just sell it, Nathan. I don't care anymore. The gaslighting was so thick it felt like smoke in the room. He was trying to rewrite my own memory. He was trying to make me doubt my own sanity. He watched me, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for me to accept his version of reality because it was easier than fighting. I looked at the signature again. It was perfect. Too perfect. I closed the folder and took a breath. I didn't crumble. I got cold. Can I have a copy? I asked, keeping my voice shaky, playing the confused victim he wanted to see. Of course, he said, smiling that shark smile. He stood up and made a photocopy, handing it to me like a consolation prize. Go get some rest, Maddie. It's done. Let it go. I took the paper. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of his office, clutching the evidence to my chest. He thought he had one. He thought he had confused me enough to make me back down. But he had made one critical mistake. He had given me the timestamps. I didn't go back to the hotel. I went straight to the county clerk's office. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a stark contrast to the polished wood of Nathan's office. I sat at a public terminal, spread the photocopy out, and logged into my professional account. As a licensed landscape architect, I have access to digital land records and permit histories that the general public doesn't usually know how to find. I wasn't just looking for the deed. I was looking for the metadata. I pulled up the digital transaction log for the sale. Nathan had filed everything electronically. Signature timestamp, October 14th, 3:42 a.m. Central Standard Time. I checked my calendar. On October 14th, I wasn't on a Zoom call. I was on a flight from Rome to London. I didn't have Wi-Fi. I couldn't have signed anything. But the log showed a verified digital signature. How? I dug deeper into the IP address log attached to the notary session. Nathan claimed I was in Florence. But the IP address for the signer wasn't Italian. It was domestic. I ran a trace. The signal originated from a residential address in Chicago. Specifically, an apartment complex in River North. I knew that building. Morgan's friend, an aspiring actress named Chloe, lived there. Morgan hadn't just forged my signature. She had hired a stand-in. She had put Chloe on a Zoom call, probably in a wig, and had her sign my name while Nathan notarized it, knowing full well it wasn't me. My hands flew across the keyboard. I wasn't done. I pulled the corporate filing for the buyer, Glass Horizon LLC. It looked like a standard shell company, registered in Delaware to hide the owners. But Nathan had been sloppy. In the initial filing application, there was a care of address listed for the registered agent. 1400 West Monroe, Suite 400. I froze. That wasn't a law firm. That was the address of a holding company I recognized. I cross-referenced it with the state business registry. The principal officer of the holding company wasn't a developer. It was Nathan. The room went silent around me. Morgan thought she had sold the property to a big developer for $9.2 million. She thought she had made a killing. She hadn't. Nathan was the buyer. He had used a shell company to buy the estate from Morgan for $9 million, knowing its assessed development value was $15 million. He wasn't just helping Morgan scam me. He was scamming Morgan. He was going to flip the property the second the demolition was done and pocket $6 million of pure profit, leaving Morgan with the legal liability and a fraction of the cash. I sat back in the chair, the enormity of it washing over me. They were eating each other. I printed everything. The flight records proving I was in the air. The IP address proving the signer was in Chicago. The corporate registry proving Nathan was self-dealing. I had enough to stop the demolition. I had enough to put them both in prison. I packed my bag. It was time to go back to the vineyard. The sun was just rising over Lake Michigan when I pulled up to the estate gate. The sky was a bruised purple, the light hitting the water in jagged streaks. It was 7:45 in the morning. The demolition crew was warming up the engines. Morgan was there, standing on the lawn with Nathan. They were holding coffee cups, laughing, watching the excavator bucket lift into the air. They looked like royalty surveying their kingdom. They thought they had one. They thought I was in a hotel room crying over a photocopy. I didn't park the rental car. I drove it right through the open construction gate and blocked the path of the excavator. Morgan spun around, spilling her coffee. Nathan took a step forward, his face twisting into annoyance. "Madeline!" he shouted. "Are you insane? Get that car out of here." I stepped out of the car. I wasn't alone. Behind me, a black SUV pulled onto the gravel. Two uniformed deputies stepped out, followed by Sheriff Miller, a man who had known my grandmother for 30 years. "What is this?" Morgan screamed, her voice shrill. "This is harassment. We have a deed." I walked up to them, holding a thick manila envelope. I didn't shout. My voice was deadly calm. "You have a deed signed by Chloe Stevens in her apartment in River North," I said, looking straight at Morgan. "I have the IP logs to prove it. And I have my flight records proving I was over the Atlantic when you supposedly watched me sign." Morgan's face went gray. She looked at Nathan, panic rising in her eyes. "Nathan, tell them. Tell them it was legal." Nathan opened his mouth, but I cut him off. I turned to him, holding up the second document. "And you," I said. "You didn't buy this for a developer, Nathan. You bought it for yourself. Glass Horizon LLC is owned by your holding company. You bought a $15 million property for $9 million. You were ripping her off the entire time." Morgan stopped breathing. She turned slowly to look at Nathan. "What?" she whispered. You own the company?" Nathan's mask slipped. He looked from me to the sheriff, realizing the walls were closing in. "It's just business, Morgan," he sneered, backing away. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "That's enough," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Nathan, Morgan, I have warrants here for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." The deputies moved in. As the handcuffs clicked around Morgan's wrists, she started to scream. "Maddie. Maddie, please. He tricked me. I didn't know. I'm your sister. You can't let them take me." I watched her struggle, watched the tears streak her expensive makeup. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, an old instinct to protect her, to fix it, to pay the bail. But then I looked at the excavator. I looked at the torn earth where the vines used to be. I realized then that the pain wasn't loss. It was surgery. I wasn't losing a sister. I was removing a tumor that had been killing this family for years. I didn't say anything. I just watched them put her in the back of the car. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Nathan turned on Morgan within hours, trading information for a lighter sentence. He admitted to the shell company scheme, admitted to notarizing the fake signature. His real estate license was revoked immediately. He's currently awaiting trial for grand larceny and fraud. Morgan didn't fare much better. When she realized Nathan had played her golden child fantasy shattered. She tried to blame everything on him, but the money trail, the shopping sprees, the transfers to her personal accounts, was undeniable. She's facing mandatory restitution and probation. The money is gone, seized by the courts. I reclaimed the deed 3 weeks later. The first thing I did was fire the demolition crew. The second thing I did was hire a restoration team to replant the vines they had destroyed. I'm sitting on the back porch now. It's evening. The sun is setting over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and fire. The air is quiet. The roar of the machines is gone, replaced by the sound of crickets and the gentle lap of waves against the bluff. I pull out my phone. I have 42 missed calls from our mother, who is devastated that I would do this to family. I have a dozen texts from Morgan's friends calling me heartless. I don't open them. I go to my contacts. I find Morgan's name. Blocked. I find my mother's name. Blocked. I open the family group chat, the one where they planned their lies and spent my inheritance. I press delete. I put the phone down on the table. The silence that follows isn't lonely. It's heavy, yes. It has weight. But it's the weight of a foundation being settled. It's the weight of peace. I take a deep breath, smelling the lake air, clean and cold. The legacy is safe. The roots are cut. And for the first time in my life, the ground beneath my feet feels solid. Sometimes, the only way to save the legacy is to cut the roots that are poisoning it. If you've ever had to make the hard choice to protect your peace, share this story. You are not alone.